Well, Cuba has long had to live with a trade embargo, of course, imposed by its near and powerful neighbor, the United States. Cuban exiles in America have traditionally been supporters of that embargo, but in November, many voted for Barack Obama, who has promised a softer stance. Our Washington correspondent, Philippa Thomas, has been talking to some of them.
They're building the inaugural parade stand here, where hundreds of people will jostle for position as Barack Obama takes office. And when he finally makes it into the White House, he'll find hundreds of policy priorities jostling for his attention. Cuba is not the highest priority, but he knows that a few small steps could yield quite dramatic results.
Cuban-American relations are still hostage to Cold War realities, the 1960s missile crisis, the desperate flight of tens of thousands of Cubans from the communist regime. For the children of those exiles, it's a different reality. They now feel they've missed out. They want to restore the connection to the homeland.
The first 21 years of my life, I got cheated. That's how I feel. I got cheated of getting to know my family in Cuba, traveling to Cuba, going to my parents' homeland, and feeling a connection to something, to my identity.
Rosie Diaz was born in Chicago, not Cuba. She and her friends here in Washington don't see the point of an ancient embargo designed to punish Castro's revolutionaries.
I think the isolation of Cuba, which the embargo has largely played a role in, has led to the success of that particular political regime.
The embargo really hasn't worked, so it's time for Plan B. If Plan A doesn't work, move on to Plan B. And I think the time is right for us to do that because the older generations, the ones that are stuck to that ideal that the embargo is going to work, they're dying off.
But what about respect for that older generation? Alfred Amado's father lost all his property and his livelihood when he fled. The Miami-born son says it's not so easy for the second generation just to abandon the embargo.
I'm kind of in a place where ideologically, I don't think it's the right policy. However, I would never go back to Cuba, and I've never been, out of respect for my dad.
But at the White House, change is coming, according to expert Dan Erickson, author of The Cuba Wars.
I think in the short term, what you're going to see is a lifting of restrictions on Cuban-American travel to Cuba, as well as the ability of Cuban-Americans to send remittances to their families in Cuba. And he has said he's interested in dialogue with the Cuban government.
This may not happen on the first day or in the first week, but there's a growing consensus that the new White House will make a move on Cuba by the time of the next Summit of the Americas in April. Philippa Thomas, BBC News, Washington.